Brandon Mills, what's going on?
Hey, Kevin, great to be here. How are you?
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. I'm excited for you to be here as well. I feel like we got a lot to talk about. You being the president of 4Ventures, specifically within the Massachusetts and Illinois region or states. So tell me, I mean, where do you reside?
Oddly far from those two states. I'm in Southern California. I'm in Orange County. Not
Got
too
you.
far from our commerce facility at 4Front, which is in Los Angeles. So
I
just
see.
south of there.
Got you. And of course, California is another market which 4Ventures serves, along with Michigan and Washington as well. So I look forward to talking to you about, the business operations. But from my understanding, to start off, let's get, an audience to get a sense of who you are and your background. So prior to joining 4Front, you co-founded and served as president and COO at Island Cannabis, which I understand is a recent acquisition for 4Front. Is that right?
Yeah, we joined the 4Front family in April of 2022 of last year. After 6 or 7 mostly fun but also very long years as a small private company in California fighting the good fight in cannabis, and ultimately decided that if we wanted to provide a path for a bigger opportunity for the brand that we built and loved so much, that it was going to be part of a bigger organization and give us access to more states. And so as part of that emotional roller coaster, we started to talk to some of the bigger MSOs and other big single state operators to see where we might be able to take Island next. And pretty quickly fall in love with 4Front once we had a chance to meet the operating team here and the leadership. And it's been a quick sprint since we joined the company, but we've already taken Island from California, where we were from 2015 through 2022 and are still today. And then launched in Massachusetts last year, launched in Illinois, and then are taking the brand to Washington next. So kind of completing the lap of all the 4Front states.
Yeah. Well, a two-part question here. One is, why 4Front when you were talking to, the other MSOs when it came to the M&A activity? And then secondly, how has your role kind of transcended over to 4Front now? I mean, you were president before, COO before. So tell me specifically your role at 4Front and, what you're responsible for there.
Yeah, for sure. So, Island was a startup in 2016 when I joined. It was just a couple of us. So and that's a size of a company that I'm very comfortable operating in, and have done a few of these over outside of cannabis. And in my prior last 15 years in tech, I've been a co-founder and CEO a couple times. Growing a small private company is a whole different beast from operating a public company that's in multiple markets, as you can imagine. So coming over from Island into the 4Front family, I think Ray, which was my business partner and Island's founder and CEO, Ray and I were both looking at it as an opportunity for ourselves professionally to take on more responsibility than what we had when we were limited to such a competitive market in California. I think at Island's heyday, we probably just breached a little over 100 employees, maybe more if you include seasonal and temporary labor, versus being at a company that's cleanly 6 to 10 times that size at 4Front. So it's a much bigger organization. We both had experience beyond running a smaller company in our past, and so I think we're quickly identified as two folks that had something to bring to the table in terms of operational expertise. And so Ray right now is the president of California operations for 4Front, which is our largest addressable market geography. And then I'm responsible for our Illinois and Massachusetts markets, which are our two more mature markets. And then Washington, well, I guess Washington's our most mature market, but Washington is still largely operated by our founder and CEO, Leah. So there's a handful of us that have P&L responsibility across each of the different markets, and that's kind of the role that we play. And then just 4Front as a platform, we also have shared services divisions that serve multiple markets. So marketing, supply chain, finance, et cetera. And we've kind of divvied those up accordingly. So marketing and product roll up to me, supply chain and product development and R&D roll up to Ray, finance and IT roll up to our CFO, Keith, and then legal is our general counsel, Chris, here in Oakland. So it's a little bit of it's
shared responsibilities.
Yeah, like many cannabis companies, there are a handful of us that are trying to wear a lot of hats right now, and just with the lack of access to capital and everybody, vigilantly fighting for a path to profitability, I don't believe that most of the other MSOs are really overly staffed for what we're trying to achieve. It feels like we're all running pretty fast and sort of thinly resourced for the visions that we have and what we have to execute on over the next couple of years. So it feels like we've all bit off quite a bit right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tell me, let's dive a little deeper in terms of, your role specifically. You mentioned, you lead product and marketing along with being president of Illinois and Massachusetts. So what are some of the marketing initiatives that you're focused on, and maybe some product enhancements or product developments that are in the works?
Yeah, great question. It's such a strange beast running operating a cannabis company, because you're effectively running the same company in multiple markets that all act very differently, and our core thesis applies in every one of these markets, but the way that it unfolds looks a lot different and feels a lot different. And so we've gone through the exercise since I joined the company of examining what our core competencies are in each market, identifying ways that we can take those core competencies and replicate them in other markets where they might be in need. And I can give you some examples of that. And then taking the things that are working in markets that are more mature and bringing them to less mature markets where we think we can kind of skate to where the puck is. So some examples of that: in California, Island as a brand was very early in identifying pre-roll as an important category. Also a category where there was at least a little bit of innovation happening versus, just packaging flower, which is more of a commodity product. Other markets like Massachusetts, maybe less so, Illinois, maybe a little bit more so, are just a little bit behind the trends that are bearing themselves out in the more mature, markets like Colorado, Washington, California. So in a lot of cases, what we're doing on the product side is taking what's working in the more mature markets out west and bringing them east. And so one of the big initiatives through Q3 and Q4 last year was to bring the Island brand and suite of products to the other markets. So that included things like Island pre-rolls, infused pre-rolls, live resin vape products, things that we knew were working in California and that we believed would work in Washington, and sort of bringing them to the East Coast and Midwest markets so that we could be closer to the early end of the adopter curve. And then same thing with marketing.
Is that just to pause you there? Do you see a common trend among consumers when you talk about, basically emulating what's working, in terms of what California, and then just having that be adopted in other states? Like, are those really consumers that are, regular smokers or, of cannabis, or are these new entrants? I mean, how does that play into your strategy?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both, and it's different by market. California obviously being very different in that we had, a medical market here since '96. We have a very entrenched black market. So we have an incredibly large adopter and consumer base that has had access to cannabis through their local weed dealer forever. It's a little bit less true in some of the other markets, especially as you get out of very urban areas and into more suburban areas. And so I think consumers have different expectations. They have different needs in terms of price point and other things that make it a little bit more nuanced. It's not like you can just take exactly what you've done in every market and replicate it everywhere. But that's our job, right? Is to identify what is the common denominator that will work in each market, or what are the pieces of the blocks that we can put in place over time to try to replicate success where we've been able to achieve it.
Got you. That makes sense. What are some of I mean, there's obviously pain, right? Economically within every industry. I mean, and so particularly in cannabis, we're seeing lots of consolidation action happening, M&A activity. I mean, we just talked about 4Front acquiring Island. So what is 4Front doing to take action during this market downturn? Like, how are they absorbing some of this pain, and kind of what has been the guiding light for the executive team?
Great question. I mean, it's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears out there right now, right? And for the biggest of us and the smallest of us, I think pain and constraints that are external to our company are a forcing mechanism to examine what we're good at and what we believe in, and the type of company that we want to be when we grow up, and force us to myopically focus on those things. At 4Front, I think over the past, just since we joined, which is about a year ago, since the Island team joined, we've already done a deep examination of each one of our markets, what's working, what's not working, and kind of shed those initiatives that we don't necessarily believe in, or where we don't think we can get the highest ROI, primarily because there's just not enough capital to experiment on things right now.
Right.
There's not a lot of room for failure. We can only focus on what we can do best. And the number one KPI right now for everyone is survival. And number two is profitability. And those are probably 1A and 1B. And so it doesn't leave a lot of room for large scale R&D experimentation, for, large splashy unproven marketing initiatives. And so unfortunately, I think the whole industry is going to go through this chapter of kind of slimming down, paring down, toning down before we get back into growth mode. We start doing things that are exciting and innovative again. And we've seen that kind of across the board. If you listen to all the big MSOs earnings calls, everyone's abandoning markets where they can't find a path to profitability, abandoning projects that aren't going to provide a short-term ROI, and probably abandoning M&A initiatives that have any sort of hair or deal risk or operational risk or financial risk associated with them. Every M&A transaction we're looking at right now has to be pretty much a slam dunk with almost no risk to it. And I think everybody shares that. So it's really been kind of a laser focus period for us, where we're rationalizing SKUs. We're taking the product portfolio and brand portfolio down to what we know is working, and investing there and trying to improve those products, hone those products, adapt those products to different markets, but largely not tying up a lot of capital in things that we don't believe will work or have a short-term path to ROI.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. We're seeing that across the board. I mean, particularly within like technology, right? The cost of capital is just so high at this point that investors are being more diligent in terms of, who they're giving money to and what they're investing in. And it's happening in cannabis also. But I'm always one to try to be optimistic and look at the positive. And while this is happening, I think it's also a good thing long term, right? Because it's just going to put those practices in place for investors and raising capital to be more rigorous and more diligent in that process. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going to weed out the imposters. It's going to weed out those with weak, unproven business models. It's going to weed out those that are incapable of raising capital even during tough times. And it's going to force the rest of us to compete on a more level playing field, at least for a period of time. And I think that's healthy. It's healthy for any industry to go through those kind of periods of reckoning. It's the equivalent of the forest fire, taking down the weak trees and providing for more air, more light for the larger trees to continue to grow and thrive. It's just it's part of nature, right? It replicates nature. So we're just in one of those cycles right now.
Right. Yeah. And would you say, I mean, that you're starting to see those bad actors and some of those, nefarious actors being weeded out because of this economic climate? Like, for instance, we all know the black market in California, and, due to high taxation. And I mean, what's happening in California specifically in that regard?
So, yeah, it's interesting. Like, bad actors for me, I think of really those that are skirting regulation and making life harder on the rest of us, which the black market, I don't think, is slowing down. There seems to be still very robust black market activity in California. Most of that product is finding its way across state lines. There's also a healthy level of interstate commerce happening right now, without interstate commerce being approved or legal. We have, if you go to New York, we were there, I guess, a couple months ago at this point, but half of the bodegas and smoke shops in Manhattan carry brands from California, from Colorado, from Washington that were brought there cross-border. They still have labels and COAs on them from the markets that they originated from, but they're making their way out of California. And so that's kind of a new wave of black market activity that I think's really picked up steam, more so than, the old school Humboldt County growers infiltrating their product into the regulated channels in California. But yeah, I still think the 80-20 rule in terms of like 80% of cannabis that's moved around the state of California is black market cannabis. I think that's still true. I don't think it's this situation hasn't improved in California.
Right. Yeah. And that New York stat is just fascinating to me. I had Peter Sue on, and I think I don't quote me on the number, but he was saying it's upwards of like 1,400, illegal dispensaries operating in New York City. Like,
Yeah,
and that's what the NYPD, right? That's what they estimated. And it's just, like you said, like right in front of your face with these products that have been registered in other states, right? Within their own tracking systems and whatnot.
It's happening in broad daylight. It's a table on a street corner where someone will roll you a joint for $5. It's every bodega with an A-frame sign outside that says THC sold here. It doesn't appear to me that anyone's afraid in New York today.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Well, and just kind of wrapping up this conversation of the current economic climate, like I would imagine partnerships are very important, right? So, I mean, you want to talk about some of 4Front's partnerships and how y'all are really banding together during this time to make things work?
Well, yeah, the biggest tier of partnerships that we have are really between 4Front and its retail partners. So California is a great example. 1,000 retailers in California, and at any point in time right now, 60, 70, 80% of those are on some sort of credit hold with the distributors because they haven't paid their bills on time. And it's not necessarily because they're not trying to. We get it. It's really difficult to survive here, but we have been forced to focus on the retail partnerships where we can get paid on time, or we can get paid COD, or we have a long-term relationship and some credit history with folks where we can trust in them. And trust is a hard thing to come by in cannabis, especially when trust represents risk. So right now, we've got a big focus on our retail partnerships. In California, we also have a private label program where we do manufacture both toll processing through our extraction lab and manufacturing, like packaging flower, co-packing, pre-rolls, and other products for third parties. And those are larger private label and white label partnerships where we're trying to do fewer of them and larger and deeper partnerships. And so rather than run a very broad private label program where you've got hundreds of clients all doing low volumes, we've been forced to do the opposite. And we've got a handful of clients that we're now mutually relying on more and more, them for our services, us for that throughput and volume to push through our platform. So those have been an important piece of the overall partnership ecosystem.
Got you. Are there any
important? Another important one is capital partners. I mean, in a world where capital is beyond scarce, 4Front's been sort of blessed to have some great capital partners that have come back to the table to fund multiple rounds of things, multiple tranches of things that have been, friendly creditors. And so we've got a good cap stack and a good board, and we're happy with where we sit today.
Yeah, I mean, blessed is the right word for sure in terms of being in that position with capital. Because we did, of course, talk about earlier, it's hard to come by in this time. Brandon, talk to me. I mean, are there any notable highlights, revenue performance, milestones that you've hit? Products you've added to the portfolios in various markets, anything that you want to kind of touch on to bring the listeners up to speed?
Yeah, I mean, we have our Q4 and fiscal year 2022 earnings call this week on Thursday. So there's probably a whole bunch of things I can't say in advance of that call, just about last year's performance. But I can say that the path to profitability has been a really important one for us for operational cash flow break even, and that's one that we'll speak to in that announcement. Taking the highest performing brands and products from each market that's working and bringing them to other markets has been, like I mentioned, a pretty big initiative. So we brought our Island portfolio of brands and products from California to Massachusetts to Illinois and now Washington. That circle is nearly complete, and we're really, really proud of the performance we've been able to put up and the consumer adoption and the feedback that we're getting from the customers that we have in those markets. We've done the same thing with Crystal Clear, which is the best, the top selling vape line that was launched in Washington is now our fastest growing product line in California. is holding its own in Massachusetts in terms of market share in the vape category, and then recently launched in Illinois, and we're beginning to scale it up there in advance of our big facility in Madison coming online. So we're excited about the Crystal Clear brand and product portfolio. 1988, the blunts product, single infused blunt, both uninfused and infused, that we have in market in Washington. We've now also launched in Massachusetts, and we'll be launching later this year in Illinois. We're really excited about that product. It's kind of a novel product. So yeah, I mean, it's just literally just, it doesn't sound like rocket science because it's not, but not everyone's fortunate enough to have a whole portfolio of brands and products that are working in large, mature, competitive markets, and we happen to have those. So it's our responsibility to bring what's working to the markets that need it most in the most capital efficient way.
Is there a meaning behind the 1988 brand? I'm just curious.
Yeah, 1988 was the first time that the word blunt was used in popular music.
Oh, nice.
So it's a nod to that, and I think we've got some literature out there that explains the backstory of it a little bit better than I'm able to.
I wonder who it was, Biggie, or that might have been too early for Biggie.
You know, I think all of them used it pretty shortly thereafter.
Yeah, you're right about that. Well, I do want to pull some questions from Twitter that that emerged. So from March to Millions, he's asking, will the Illinois facility be heavily focused on third-party production and white labeling like the California facility, or will the focus be more geared toward their own brands in an attempt to grab market share?
It's a good question. So our facility in Matteson is an absolute monster. It will be construction complete in April. The only remaining milestones we have to hit are getting permanent power to the building in partnership with ComEd and the city of Madison. So that's an ongoing project. But when we do bring it online, it'll have roughly 4.5 to 5x the flowering canopy in phase 1A that we have in our current facility in Illinois. So plenty of headroom to scale very quickly. That scale and that throughput you can point that fire hose down two channels, right? Our retail channel, which today we only have 2 retail stores in Illinois out of 10 that we can have. So a path to owning the other 8 retail stores that we don't own and operate or haven't built out today is an important path that we'll be pursuing and speaking more to in the coming days. And then a wholesale channel, which we've been supply constrained in Illinois for better or worse, because almost everything we produce out of our Elk Grove facility gets sold through the 2 Mission retail stores that we have open there in South Chicago and Calumet. So we have kind of a spillover. Wholesale is basically a spillover channel for us right now if we can't move it through our own retail stores. Wholesale will become a much bigger growth lever for us once Matteson's online. And so I think those will be 2 areas where you'll see us invest heavily, which are our wholesale presence, including a select group of our brands and products, and then building out the other 8 retail stores that we're allowed to have in the state. Beyond those 2 initiatives, and depending on how quickly we can scale both of those, yes, we will look at doing private label for other partners. Illinois has proven to be a state where a lot of the other MSOs are friendly with one another. There are a lot of quid pro quo relationships. So if there's an opportunity where we can lean on someone in return for some shelf space in their retail footprint, and they can lean on us for a manufacturing relationship, happy to explore those opportunities all day long. I can say that one thing we found in California is that a lot of the private label partners that we were approached with, both at 4Front and at Island, because we did private label for folks at Island before we joined 4Front, it was a lot of experimentation, a lot of 0 to 1, a lot of small orders, and so there ended up being more noise than signal on the private label front. And so that's forced us over time to really focus on the brands and products that we believe in. And that's the same sort of lens that we'll approach Illinois with. The other thing that's interesting, just from an overall competitive landscape perspective, is that we've built this fine-tuned platform that scales really, really well and can provide, incredibly low cost, high quality production. How many competitors do you want to enable with that platform? And that's always the pendulum swinging on. You can You can leverage a private label program to help, give you an opportunity to provide more throughput to your team and the equipment that you've built out, help absorb overhead, lower your gross margins across the board, run a healthier business. Or you can be selfish and hold that capacity to yourself, and not enable any competitors that you can compete. And maybe the right answer long term is that it'll be a mix of both. I think time will tell.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a related question, and I think you partially answered it because you mentioned, so the question is, how many Illinois dispensaries do you plan to open this year? You mentioned you can open 10. You have 2 currently operating. So I guess what's your focus for opening, and what's the number for this year?
I can't speak to the number for this year for opening. There may be more information on that in the earnings call later this week. I can say that we believe in retail as a valuable piece of our platform in each market that we're in, where we're able to have retail, which we can't in Washington, as an example. So I believe it's our long-term goal to have the full cap of 10, if that's still the cap at the time.
Gotcha.
That is a path we will go down.
Okay. And I wanted to attribute that question to Grant, hashtag #PonyUp81. Thank you, Grant. Well, Brandon, I mean, the floor is yours. What do you want to leave the audience with? Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you'd like to speak to as we wrap up here?
It's tough, man. Cannabis has been a slog for many of us. The macro environment has been super challenging, from the vape crisis of 2019 through COVID, through a capital crunch, through the banking collapse of recent. It's been punch in the face after punch in the face after punch in the face, in a world where there's no oxygen, there's no access to capital, safe banking keeps getting kicked. I would say that we're proud to be amongst the top MSOs in the US. We really, really believe in our vision. We believe in the platform that we've built. We believe in the partnerships and ecosystems that we participate in. We're excited to be here for the long term. You're going to see 4Front really, really focus on what's working, on what we're great at, what are our superpowers, what are our core strengths and differentiators. And in the markets that we're in, and this is one of the things that I fell in love with when I first met the team, we're competing for the win. We're not entering markets to be 16th place. We want to be top 3, top 5, top 2, or number 1. And I think we've built the platform that can get us there in each of the markets that we're in. And now it's a matter of maniacal focus on operational excellence, which is something we happen to be really good at. And the other thing I'd say is, it takes a team in cannabis to succeed, right? It's not just a group of bankers that can package a bunch of assets that look great on paper and in a spreadsheet. That will work for a period of time, and it'll work in certain environments. And I don't think that we're in that environment any longer. And I think operations and real core capabilities matter right now. And I just couldn't be more thankful or proud of the humans that I'm surrounded with at 4Front every day, from the top down, our C-suite, all the way down to every single hourly operator at each of our facilities. When you walk in, when you walk into a 4Front facility, you see a place where people have a lot of pride of ownership, a lot of pride in their work. The facilities are well taken care of. They're clean. The people are well taken care of. They're happy. They're friendly. You can tell when company culture has been constructed the right way. And I'm excited to help take it into the next chapter and continue on what Leo and team started here.
Very well said, sir. I love the attitude that you have. Lead with gratitude, positivity, thankfulness. Hey, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of companies that haven't made it, and they're continuing to sink every day, right? In this current climate that we talked about earlier. And the fact that y'all are still in it and, still able to expand and think about growth potential, that's amazing. So really appreciate you coming on, Brandon. This was a pleasure. Where can people find y'all's website, social media, any type of information to learn more about 4Front Ventures?
Yeah, you can in our website at 4Front Ventures. We also have our Mission Dispensaries website that you can search for. We're also on Twitter and Instagram. So we're everywhere. Everywhere you want to find us, you can find us.
There you go. Well, I appreciate it again. Thank you so much. Look forward to watching y'all's progress, and thank you all for listening.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.